For people out there who are listening, and I know there are a lot of closet poets out there,
Yeah.
what would you do to encourage them to write poetry? Not necessarily as a career, but just to express themselves and use poetry as a medium of expression.
I think actually the best thing you can do is read.
Mm.
Because I think there's a poet called Peter Sansom, and he said, "You're reading in the dark if you're only reading yourself." So read, just read. And then, of course, Seamus Heaney used to come in and do readings for us, and then like I was lucky with him as well because he actually rang me and asked me to come to his house when I was in my early 20s, and he went through my poems with me, and it was an amazing. Now that
Gosh,
was a
that's
workshop worth going to.
yeah. Did you realize at the time that you really were, in the presence of greatness?
Well, I think with Seamus Heaney I did because I
Yeah.
had read all his stuff, and that was a big thing for me. My dad driving me into Sandy Mountain, I had to get in. He said, "Can I come in with you?" And I said, "No, I have to go in on my own."
Good morning, everybody. My guest this morning is Enda Wyley. Now, Enda was born in Dunleary, County Dublin, and has published 6 collections of poetry with Daedalus Press. Awards include the Vincent Buckley Poetry Prize, Melbourne University, and she was the recipient of a Catherine and Patrick Kavanagh Fellowship for Poetry. Enda has been a judge for several competitions, including the International Dublin Literary Award, the Red Lion Poetry Festival, and Strokestown International Poetry Festival. She has co-hosted with poet Peter Sirr the popular podcast Books for Breakfast and Stanza, a poetry programme for RTE Radio 1. She's a member of Ace Dona, the Irish Academy of Artists. So let's go straight over and say good morning to Enda. Good morning, Enda. How
Hello,
are you?
Alan. How are you? Thank you very much for having me on.
Not at all. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So one of the reasons, of course, we have you on today is because I'm very interested in that you're involved in the Bere Island Arts Festival.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's happening. Well, I'll be there. It's happening in September this year,
Yeah.
the 19th to the 22nd. I'm really looking forward to it because I've never been on the island. I've been
Oh,
on
have I?
obviously
Yeah.
other islands before in Ireland, but this is going to be very exciting. And Pauline Hurley was in touch with me and she asked me to come down and do a reading. And also, they've never had a poetry competition before either. So that's been exciting. The deadline was quite recently, so I'm still going through those poems. And the idea was that the word island had to be in them. So it's been really
Yes.
great reading these poems, and there'll be a first, second, and third prize. So I'll be reading with Tom McCarthy. Then I will be doing a poetry workshop, which I'm really looking forward to, Poetry
Oh,
Alive,
wonderful.
because yeah, it's a great way of, meeting people. And there's
Yeah.
loads of other events on as well. The poet Keith Payne is down there, Tom McCarthy, my partner in Poetry Crime, Peter Sirr, he'll be launching the festival and he'll be reading as well. There'll be loads of music and singing and hopefully great crack. So if
Yeah.
anyone's listening, do come
Mm.
along, from the 19th of September on, and you can check it out on the website as well. All the events are there. So yeah,
That's
I'm
right.
really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have to give a mention to our old buddy, Bill Griffin, who's also exhibiting his paintings.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. Yeah, it's going to
yeah.
be really great. And I
Yes.
didn't realize it's actually quite a big island as well. And there's going to be, lots of creative action going on all
Mm.
over the island. So it'll be great.
Yes.
It's very historical space as well, the island. So
It
I'm really looking
is.
forward,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's sort
to
of a
seeing.
military history to it as well.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
yeah, Mary Sullivan has done a lot of work in that area.
Yeah, and the Napoleonic
Performance.
Tower. Of course, see,
Mm.
I grew up out by Sandy Cove Way, so I love towers. Every Bloomsday, I used to go down to the Martello Tower in Sandy Cove, and Barry McGovern would be there reading a bit of Ulysses,
All
and
right.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's really nice. So it's going to be great to go to the island, and of course, Dalkey Island, close to where I grew up to as well. It had a Martello Tower, and it had
Mm. Mm.
various historical buildings on it. So yeah, I'm
Yes.
really looking forward to getting to Beara.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. Very interesting. So tell us about Dunleary and your sort of growing up in Dunleary. Was poetry something that was always in the back of your mind, or could you have been, gone in a completely different direction?
Well, you see, my parents are both from Cork City, so they basically decamped when they were about 21, and my mother always describes that she was standing in Kent Station in Cork, and it was like all the family came out to say goodbye to the pair of them. It was like they were going to New York or something, you know.
Sounds like it.
So yeah, there was great sadness when they left. And
Yeah.
I remember my mum told me that my grandfather, my mother only had one sister. She's still alive, actually. My mother died at the beginning of the pandemic. So,
Oh
but
no.
my
Oh,
grandfather really loved my mother, and she was his youngest. And he said when she left to go to Dublin, well, 'tis aisy counting us now, because there were so few of them left. So it was sad. But
oh
they went to
dear.
Dublin because my father, you asked me about poetry, and
Yeah.
my father was obsessed and still is with cinema, books, theatre, art. So
Mm,
he wanted to get to the what he saw as the big metropolis and get to
yes.
Parsons Bookshop. He remembers seeing Kavanagh there and the two old ladies that ran it. And so they I don't think they really had a clue about Dublin where to live. But
Mm,
both my
mm,
parents loved the sea and loved swimming. So we ended up in, like, what was then in the 60s, they bought a house there, which would have been, you know, a new up and coming housing estate. But sure, we
sure.
loved it because there were loads of kids there. And then we could cycle down to school in Dalkey or go up Killiney Hill or down the pier. We were very lucky. But poetry came, I suppose, in those very early days. Like I was writing when I was 9 or 10,
Were
even
you?
earlier, probably. Yeah. My
Yes, yes.
mother, my mother was hilarious because she, even though I always think it's my dad who read poetry, my
Mm,
mother was very interested in it as well and very interested in books. And there's a famous story in our house that I'd written a poem about a monster when I was only
mm,
about 8, and I
yeah.
just crumpled it up and threw it away. And my mother came and she picked it up and she ironed it and she sent it off somewhere. And I didn't know where it had gone because in those days, like, we were all very busy. We were very busy, Alan. We had to
Mm,
cycle and we had to play with friends and go to the cinema and do all this stuff. But one day a letter arrived and it had my name on it. And you know, when you're that age and you get
oh
a
yeah.
letter with your name on it, it's like, oh my God. So it
Yes.
said that I had to go to Doneraile because, of course, my mother's from Cork, so she sent it to Doneraile to a poetry festival, and it got
Right.
first prize. And we all had such fun. We all had to get in the car, the
Yeah.
dog, the five of us, go to Doneraile, and then Professor John A. Murphy stood on a stage, and
Yes.
he gave me. Now this is hilarious. This would turn you off writing poetry for life, I think. He
Mm,
gave me the collected works of Canon Sheehan because he was from Doneraile. And
yeah.
here I was like this little 9-year-old taking this big heavy book, but he also gave me a check, right?
Yeah.
Some money.
Oh.
And I always remember my father saying to me, "Oh no, you're a real writer because you got paid for what you did." So that was kind of good. But
And
I
did you
don't
frame it or cash it?
well, I'd say we went off and just cashed it and bought sweets or something like that. We were so
Sure. Yeah.
excited. But like, in a way, you don't write for money, or you don't do it for that. You do because you love it. So, you know, I
Mm,
mentor a lot and I teach poetry, and that's why, as I said, when I go to Bere Island, I'm really looking forward to teaching their
yes.
poetry. But I really think you should do it for the love of it, the fun of it, the enjoyment of it.
Mm,
That's first and foremost for me. When I met my husband, Peter Sirr, he's a poet as well. He
mhm.
kept using the word work. And I was going, oh my God, so it's work. Whereas I actually just enjoyed
Yeah.
it. But I
Yes.
think as well, you see, I trained originally to be a primary school teacher. And I trained in Kerrysford College, where Seamus
Mhm.
Heaney had taught as well. And he just had left a few years before I went in. And there was a great love of poetry in that college.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I kind of I had got into Trinity to do English and history, and I just took a turn and I took a bus into Blackrock and did the interview and got the space on that course. But I often wonder, should I have gone and done straight English, you know? But I was very lucky in
Mm,
the community that I encountered in that college, because the English lecturers were really, really into poetry and they encouraged me. And then, of course, Seamus Heaney used to come in and do readings for us, and so he was, you know, he felt like a real poet was close
yeah.
to you, you
Yeah.
know, so it was very interesting. Um, and then, like, I was lucky with him as well because he actually rang me and asked me to come to his house when I was in my early 20s, and he went through my poems with me, and it was an amazing. Now that
Gosh,
was a
that's
workshop worth going to,
yeah,
but I was
absolutely.
I was
Yeah.
very shy at the time, and
Mm.
I was really nervous of going. And I
Yeah.
just remember he said, what would you like to drink? And I just said, water. I just didn't even know how to speak, you know. But he went through the poems, and he was really astute about how to break lines. And
Mm.
you know, there was one poem that actually worked, and he was like, "Oh, now how did you do that?" You know,
Yeah.
he was good fun, and he gave me books like Robert Lowe's. He gave me Robert Lowe's Life Studies, which is a fantastic book, and he
Mm.
gave me Elizabeth Bishop. And I remember they were American editions of
Right.
the poems, and of course we had never seen them over here, so it
Mm.
was really beautiful to get them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was lucky like that. There, I think I came because I was writing from when I was very young. A
Mm.
lot of the really great poets were around, like Seamus Heaney and Evan Boland, Michael
Mm.
Hartnett, Paul Durkin, Michael Longley, and I did
Mm.
encounter them. And like when I was a teenager, again, I never did anything. My religion teacher sent off a poem I'd written into
Yeah.
RT, and of course Evan Boland was judging it, so I ended up going in and having to go on radio for the first time. And again,
And
when
what
you're
age were
that
you
age,
then?
I was 16, and I think I was just
No,
like,
really?
yeah, I was too.
Gosh.
I think I was quite shy, but she was a force to meet, you know. And
Hmm.
I remember she said afterwards, "Will you come for coffee?" And I was thinking, no, well, I don't even drink coffee, you know. So, but you learned a lot by reading all those poets. They were alive, and you could see them, you could
Yeah.
go and hear them. It's very vibrant. I mean, there's a different generation, obviously, now of younger poets coming up. Some of
Hmm.
the more established are obviously still with us, like Elaine Quillenon and Paul Durkin. But I think I was very lucky in the guides that I looked to at that time. You know, it
Yeah.
was a good time for poetry. But I think now it's getting more open and it's more diverse, and there's space for women. I often
Mm.
think I grew up in a very kind of male-dominated poetry world time. You know,
Right. Okay.
um,
Yes.
and I think it's good. It's positive that, you know, there is space for all types of poetry now, spoken
Yeah.
word, poets from other countries, you know, so we have to embrace all that and celebrate it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I mean, what a privilege to be rubbing shoulders with the, you
Yeah,
know,
I know. By default, it was just by
yeah.
it is kind of nearly casual. I mean,
Mm.
it just happened, and it
Did
was.
you realize at the time that you really were, in the presence of greatness?
Well, I think with Seamus Heaney I did, because I
Yeah.
had read all his stuff, and that was a big thing for me. My dad driving me into Sandy Mountain, I had to get in. He said, "Can I come in with you?" And I said, "No, no, I have to go in on my own."
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
but you see, then like you would meet Seamus around if he was back in Ireland, and that was great, you know. So he was a very generous poet, I think, you know.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, with other
And tell me,
poets.
is there a defining moment where in your career, the early stages, that you sort of decided for yourself that this is exactly the route I want to go? Did something trigger that, or
Yeah.
was it a gradual process?
Yeah, I think it was, as I said, that in our house, books were considered like
Mhm.
brilliant things. And like
Yeah,
we'd talk about books and we'd say, I read that or you read that. And it might just be anything when you were little, like Enid Blyton but I
sure.
do remember moments like my father holding Thomas Hardy's love poems from 1913 after his wife Emma died. Thomas
Yeah,
Hardy then starts to write all these love poems, why he loved her so much. And my father just closing the book with a big bang and saying, "That's it. That is the greatest poet of the 20th century." And when there was kind of a drama to it, and I think that drama made me go, "What is that?" And look at them. And also, I remember my mother coming back from Trinity because Seamus Heaney had gone in to read to the students, and he was
hmm,
reading from Fieldwork. And it was this amazing book with, I don't know if you've ever seen, with a map of Glanmore, where his cottage down in Wicklow, and it
yeah,
was that map was on it, and I found that interesting to watch it, you know, and see map it, and then to
yeah,
read the poems, because I suppose, you know, when you're young, I personally loved my parents, and if they were interested in things, I had a look, and I
yeah.
just kept thinking, who is this poet? So I think that field work coming into the house, my father banging the book about Hardy, but
Mm.
also I had got a present for one of my birthdays when I was a teenager, and it was a book by Ted Hughes called Poetry in the Making. And basically, what it was Ted Hughes had been asked to write a series of radio pieces for the BBC for children and poetry. And it's a slim, tiny little book, but it has things like how to capture animals, how to write about weather. I can see all your paintings behind you there in your work, Alan. I know you're an artist as well. But these are all things that we think about. How will I get that animal on, say, if you're trying to paint it or you're trying
Yes.
to write about it? Like for instance, Rainer Maria Rilke, he was actually, a lot of poets and visual artists often connect. He was the secretary for Rodin, the sculptor in Paris.
Hmm.
And one day he said, the poet said, I just don't know what to write about. And so Rodin said, well, go to the zoo and sit there and just look at an animal. And so Rilke comes back and he wrote The Panther, which is just like the most amazing poem.
Yeah, yeah.
And equally, he wrote a poem called The Archaic Torso of Apollo, which is basically looking at this torso of Apollo
Mm.
really intensely and then
Yes.
trying to write about it. So Ted Hughes did it in this book, Poetry in the Making, which I
Mm.
always recommend to people. And I know he gets a lot of flack because he was married to Sylvia Plath, and there are Plath supporters, but like I always say, we don't know what went on in that marriage. I mean, I don't know what it was like to be married to Sylvia Plath or Ted Hughes, but I do know
Yes,
that they're
yes,
both amazing poets.
sure.
And so I really valued that book. But it's funny when you go back and look at it now, a lot of the samples of poems within it are male poets. They're fantastic poets, but they're poets of the 60s and 70s that Ted Hughes used. And I
Mm.
think actually in the collected letters of Seamus Heaney that have just come out, I saw a review of it recently, and they were saying that he moved in a male world, and he knew that it was a male
Yes.
world. So I think the women are now coming. Well, I mean, they have been anyway. I mean, we've fantastic female poets, but it's good that it's opening out.
Yeah. I mean, why would you say it was male dominated? Because you'd imagine something like poetry, was across the board and unlike some other professions or careers.
Yeah, but it's a bit like when I think it was Evan Boland was doing a workshop and she said to somebody, "Why aren't you writing poetry?" And she said, "I have to clean windows." So I think
Mhm.
women were there doing a lot of the domestic work, and
Sure.
minding the children and
Mm.
not having the time. And also because, as we know, I mean, men were out there in the world and
Mm.
uh, they had more opportunity, I think, to be published and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Um,
probably. Yeah.
but yeah, but at the same time, I suppose there were you have to value people in Ireland. I think publishers as well, like Dermot Bulger set up Raven Arts Press, and he published people like Kathleen Maud or Peter Fallon publishing Nuala Gonal. So publishers, we depend on them as well.
Yes, yes.
Seeking out the work,
Mm.
and that's
Mm.
good.
Tell me a little bit about your actual creative process, because I know of, for instance, Ruth Stone, who you probably know of,
I love Ruth
the
Stone.
American
Yeah,
poet. There's,
yeah.
there's a lovely description of how she used to follow words in the wind
Oh, lovely. Yeah,
and would have to run off and write them down before they went through her.
yeah.
But and also described how in one occasion the words went through her and she ran after them and pulled them back in. And she
Oh,
actually wrote down the words backwards, the entire poem
oh,
backwards.
that is so
So,
beautiful, isn't
which is
it?
kind of really strange in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it is a process, and it's where something you allow something happen to you rather than you generating it. What is it
Yeah.
like for you? How do you generate creativity in terms of your poetry?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Ruth Stone actually because I have her collected poems right beside my bed. I
Yeah,
love her. I love her work, and
yeah,
she's written so many beautiful poems about grief and the death of her husband as well.
yes,
Yeah, I always say it's not the poet that controls the poems; it's the poems that can guide or control the
yeah,
poet. And really, what Ruth Stone was describing there was that dreamlike quality that you
mhm,
have to go so in, and then she's chasing after it. It's a bit like you wake up from a dream, and should you
mm,
have a notebook by your bed to try and write it
yes,
all down?
sure,
With me, it comes naturally, and that could be you could be waiting for a long time because a
mm,
poem may not come every day. But when it comes, it's instant. and I just have to get it down.
Yes,
And
yes, that's
a
interesting.
bit like, again, like the painter, you have to make the mark on the page. And once
Mm,
you've made the mark, well, then you can, well, I call it play. You can play with it or manipulate it,
sure.
or but even then, the poem might say, no, no, I want to go this way. So
Yeah,
you have to
yeah.
go, yeah, sometimes you pull it back, but sometimes you go, no, I'm going to go with this. And
Right.
sometimes a poem can become something that you did not think it was going to be. And I think that that is the joy of reading poetry, actually. You begin a poem and it
Mm,
takes you on a journey. And at the end, it's taken you, a really great poem will take you somewhere you did not expect. Yesterday I was reading a poem by Simon Armitage, and he says it's called Shout, and he's
mm,
talking about when he was a child, the teacher would send them out to the yard and they had to measure the sound of the human voice. And he's doing it with his best friend. And then suddenly at the end of the poem, it shoots forward into Australia. And he says, boy with a name and a face I don't remember, I can still hear you. And he had committed suicide in Australia. And you didn't expect that this schoolyard poem is suddenly going to go all the way to the end of the world, to
yeah,
Australia, So
yes.
I think that that's very interesting. Yeah.
But it is the mark of real creativity, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're almost not conscious of what you're doing.
Yeah.
On that subject, would you like to
Yeah.
read one of your poems and maybe introduce
Okay.
it first, rather than
Yeah, I
getting
will.
straight into it?
Now, I hope this is we're having lovely poetry breakfast, aren't we, the two of us?
Here we
So let
are.
me think now. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll read actually things we were talking about, painting and poetry. Let me see now. So I just wanted to show you this because this is you can see
I
it
know who that
there.
is.
Yeah, who is it?
James Andy.
It's sorry, say that again.
Isn't it James?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is right. Yeah, I didn't know
Yeah,
what you said there. Sorry, Alan.
yeah.
Yeah, that is it's a drawing by James Hanley of his father. And what happened was I was working with Sing Street Boys School up in Dublin 8 here. I live close to the city here in Dublin.
Mhm.
And I wanted to do a project around the portrait of the city. And I thought I'd get a portrait artist in. So I thought of James Hanley because if anyone listening has been to the National Gallery, there's an amazing portrait of Ronnie Delaney done there by James Hanley. But he's a very good portrait artist. But apart from that, he's a great conversationalist. And he came in with this big bag of stuff that inspires him.
Yeah,
And it was all like things like military medals and different things.
yes.
And then suddenly he held up this actual portrait,
Mm,
and he said, "These eyes that first saw mine," and his dad had just recently died, so it was quite emotional. And when he went outside, he got on his bike and he cycled down Heytesbury Street, and the painting was banging against his knee. And you asked earlier, when do poems come? It came at that moment when I was just standing there watching
yes.
him. And I thought, oh, there is a poem. So I will read it for you now.
Do
And
please.
actually, it became the title poem of this book, The Painter on His Bike. So that's actually
Ah, yeah.
Grafton Street, even though it doesn't, it looks like Italy. We need that
Does
sunshine
actually.
now.
Yeah,
That's what we need,
does.
Alan. But I'll read it for you anyway. The
Okay.
Painter on His Bike, for James Hanley. The painter on his bike balances his father, sketched in pencil, wrapped in paper on his handlebars. As he cycles down Heytesbury Street, the twist of string around the frame loosens for a second. The painter's breath caught too by the sudden sight of his dead father's eyes. They saw me before I saw myself. He stops at the curb, tugs at the twine, frees it from the spokes, sets off again, the bike wobbling, bumping over potholes and tramlines, the picture beating against his knee. He is cycling the portrait home, and later, a fire lit, the paper unbound. Father, whose eyes rise up from the face your son drew like two dark lost moons. So there you
It's
go, Alan.
extraordinary. Extraordinary. What did James Hanley make of that?
Well, I was a bit nervous about that because it wasn't my dad. So
Yes, yes, yes.
I suddenly thought, oh God, I better. So I sent him the poem. Actually, he was absolutely thrilled. He was delighted.
Yeah.
But also, it's kind of strange because I was writing about his dad, and I hadn't seen James for many years until he came in to do this project. But way, way back, my own father was involved in the RHA gallery in Ely Place in Dublin at its beginning stages. And he also worked in the SB, and he had set up an art prize called the Sean Keating Art Prize, and he awarded, with the team of people that were working with him, he awarded it to James Hanley. And James Hanley he was in art college, and it was the first ever prize he was ever awarded, and it was he says it was a huge thing for him because it got him started, a bit like me going in and meeting Evan Boland, it got him started. And
Yes.
so then, in thanks for my poem, he then did my father's portrait. So it's so
Oh,
nice.
really?
It kind of
Really?
came round full circle, so I
Yeah.
think that's really nice.
Have you a copy of that somewhere, or
Well, it's
photograph?
in my father's house now, so he has that. But it was really nice because we went into the RHA, and
Yeah.
there's a nice kind of cafe there, and James gave it to my dad.
Yes.
But it's funny, you always have artists hanging around, and I know that an artist you'll be talking to is Mick O'D, and Mick O'D was there, and he came over and they kind of jostling to see it and see was it any good, this kind of
Yes.
competition that goes on between artists. But I think it got the approval of Mick O'D, which is very
Oh,
good.
that's very good indeed.
That's
Yeah.
good, isn't it?
You must send me an image of that, and I'll pop it in
Oh yeah, okay,
the
yeah. I'll look
recording.
for it and see can I find it, Alan. Yeah, no problem.
Do. Okay. Um, I said we'd do two poems. Would you like to do another one while we're at it?
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
mean, I was talking about my mother there. I couldn't really have begun without her, and it was very sad because she died in COVID and we couldn't get in to see her. She was in a nursing home. We had to look through the window at her, and in fact, my next collection is going to be called Through the Window. There are poems about my mother, but also I like that idea that I think as artists we're either looking in or looking out at things, so
Yeah.
it's got kind of a double meaning. But I'll read a poem called Mother for my mother, and it's from my selected poems called Borrowed Space, because I
Yes.
do think actually we are borrowed space. We're here for a
Mhm.
short time, and it's borrowed really, but it's for my mother, and it's a poem that's appeared in a lot of anthologies, which is nice.
Mhm.
We were talking earlier about how poems come about, but it is wonderful, I think, that poems can go off and have a life of their own and end up
Mm.
places you least expect. So this is
Yeah.
called Mother for my mother. Mother, there is a room in my head to which you often come. Orchid gifts wet with rain in one hand, in the other, your love, wrapped up in a cutout newspaper piece you'd saved just for me. Or maybe sealed tight in irregular pots of homemade orange jam. You come in, and we quickly leave behind the thorny rose gardens of our grown up fights. I smooth out the creases in your gentle face I know I've often caused, while you, keeping me from the shabby coldness of this outside world, put the last stitch on my coat.
Beautiful, beautiful poem. That must have
Thank
been a
you.
particularly sad time for you, during
Yeah.
COVID, not being able to see your mom properly.
Yeah, it was because she actually died in April of 2020, and COVID, as you know, began in March.
March, that's right.
But nobody I knew had thought of looking through the window. And I remember saying to my brother, we were in the nursing home, and saying, I know we can go down the back
Yeah.
and he was going, no, you can't do that. And I was going, no, let's do that. So we crawled through the bushes and peered in.
Oh
Oh,
dear.
look, it
Yeah.
was the closest we could. We were lucky she was on the ground floor and we could do that. But
Mhm.
yeah, we had all that stuff about the funeral, which was only us. And,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
still, we managed to have a good time. We managed to sing songs that she loved at the graveside, and we
Yeah.
got blossoms because it was spring. Do you remember that was a beautiful
Oh,
spring?
absolutely. It was a
Yeah.
scorcher. Yeah.
So
Absolute
we did
scorcher.
manage to have a bit of fun.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, she was a
Oh,
great
that's
woman.
good.
And yeah, so
That's good.
yeah,
Yeah. Good. I generally ask artists at some point um, if they were to beg, borrow, or steal a work of art to hang
right,
over their mantelpiece. And it
right.
could be from a museum, it could be a very, an ancient master, or it could be something very modern. Who would it be? Now, in your case, I'm not going to ask you that, because you're more into the voice as against the hand of, the art. And what I'd ask a poet is, if you were to have somebody for dinner, say to a dinner party or something like that, who would you invite? Now you can
Um,
invite as many people as you like, and they could be living or dead.
I'll invite you, Alan.
Oh, thanks so much. That's a given.
um,
Who else would you like to have?
yeah, I have to say I really love my own friends, so I would have to invite
Yeah, of
them as well. And maybe I
course.
would invite someone like James Hanley. If I could have them back again, I would love to have. Uh, well, I would like to have met Thomas Hardy, I have to say, or Ted
Yeah.
Hughes, or I'd like Elizabeth Bishop at my table. But let me think now. Uh, um, you see, like I love fiction as well and short stories.
Yes.
So I'm reading a woman at the moment called Alba de Cespedes. She was actually the granddaughter of the Cuban president, and she wrote in the 50s.
All
And
right.
she wrote brilliantly about women being
Mm,
married in Italy. She then moved to Rome. So I wouldn't
mhm.
mind having Alba there, and we'd have loads of Italian food because I love Italy as well. So that would
Yeah.
be fun, Alan. I'd have her, I'd have some male poets, and actually I would have painters. I wouldn't mind meeting Vermeer because I was recently in the National Gallery and they
Mm,
have the beautiful Vermeers side by side,
yes.
beautifully lit. Oh, they're absolutely stunning. So I'd like to have Vermeer as well, and I would hang up one of his paintings, um, in praise of him over the
Yeah.
dinner table.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice.
We had Michael Harding on a while ago, and I asked him the same question,
Yeah,
and he was dismissing all sorts of people,
right.
poets and writers and whatever.
How dare he?
And
How dare he?
I know, and he said, I wouldn't have Joyce. Now he's too erudite, and he'd be
Yeah,
asking me things in Latin about Cicero, and I
right.
wouldn't have a second clue.
That's very funny. Yeah, that's true. You get into difficulty there. Yeah.
Yeah, so he ended up with Sam Beckett,
Oh, yeah, no, that would
and
be
I
nice
and I
as
said
well.
to him, I said, so it's dinner for one then, is it?
Yeah, I know.
For
Very
two?
good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know it
Yeah.
sounds as if you'd have a fair crowd now at your dinner party
Yeah,
by
I
the
think
sound of
so.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um.
because I remember years ago I went to Melbourne as poet in residence, and the head of English in the university there, his name was Chris Wallace Crabb, and actually he had been friends with Seamus Heaney. They'd met in Berkeley as well, so there were all these connections. But at the
mm,
end, I was there for like a few weeks, and he said, "Enda, you can bring. I'm going to put on an Aussie accent. You can bring anyone you want now to your farewell dinner." But little did he know that I'd been out and about, and I'd met loads of people. So suddenly he
yeah.
had to pay for about 40 people for dinner. He's going, I didn't expect this much. So anyway, so I do like to be social. I like to go out and meet people. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So it could be a rowdy dinner party, all right.
It sounds it. It sounds it. So, and to tell me for people out there who are listening, and I know there are a lot of closet poets out there.
Yeah.
What would you do to encourage them to write poetry? Not necessarily as a career, but just to express themselves and use poetry as a medium of expression. They may
Yeah.
well be painters as well, but because I
Yeah.
know a lot of painters, some not a lot, some painters who would actually write poetry as well.
Yeah, I've
But
encountered
don't
them
tell
as
anyone.
well. I know, no, sure, I know all about them. I've encountered them and like fair
Really?
play to them. I think it's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me think now. I think actually the best thing you can do is read.
Mm,
Because I think there's a poet called Peter Sansom, and he said, "You're reading in the dark if you're only reading yourself." So just read. Loads of poetry. Try and
yeah.
read maybe a poem a day to start off, and then build and build and build, because that's how. And then also read as if you want to write, so you're watching how they use
Yeah.
images or how they might technically do things, all that. But
Mm,
I also think go out in the world, live your life, have experiences, and enjoy your life, and from that will come an urge or a feeling to write if you want to. And
mm.
then I think write, like even write just for 5 minutes every day, and
Like
not to
journaling.
be, yeah, and not to be
Mhm.
concerned about things like, was that a good line, or should that be in a particular verse or form? Just write and get it down. And then, when you've done that, then you can fiddle and play and try and do something with it. And also, like, get out there and go to readings, hear people perform, podcasts, listen to them, listen to the radio. Arena is a great
Mm,
show. The BBC have brilliant poetry programs on. So I think that embrace it in all levels of your
mm,
life.
mm.
And I think then it'll come. I mean, it will come if you really want it to, I think, as well, you know.
Tell me more about your podcast now, because that's something I've listened to it. But one of the interviews I listened to, was with Gabriel Byrne.
Oh
It was
yeah,
a
yeah.
fascinating interview, really,
Yeah.
really interesting. And yourself and your husband Peter do this. Tell us a bit
Yeah.
about it. You know, how long you've been doing it and what's involved.
Yeah. Well, I think we've been doing the songs you've been doing yours,
Mm,
Alan. We've been we I think we all started in COVID, isn't that it? Around
right, that's right.
2020.
Yeah.
Well, originally, you see, I think it was that thing we were all a bit hanging around the house and bored, and Peter reads an awful lot of poetry, and he and then I read poetry and I also read fiction and other things. So we just thought we just do this very short thing where we would say to each other, "What are you reading? What are you reading?" And then we'd have just a chat. So originally we began doing that and we were playing around with equipment and trying different things. And then of course it just developed and it became once a week. It's called Books for Breakfast. And we had good fun at the time because our daughter, she's now 19, but she was at the time she does art and she did a little logo for us and then we got Colin McAnumra, the musician, and he allowed us to use a little bit of his music for the signature tune and so it just developed and developed and now we used to do it once a week, but now what we do is we do twice a week and we also it's kind of seasonal, like we've taken a summer break so we begin
Mm,
again in
mm,
autumn. And really, we just go for people we're interested in. And
yeah.
like for instance, there's a writer from Sligo called Una Mannion, and
Hmm.
she was a new writer. She was a woman writing in her 40s. She published her first book called A Crooked Tree. And I thought she was really interesting. And so we interviewed her, and she was just beginning. And now with her second book, she's just won the Gold Dagger Award for crime writing. So it's kind of interesting to see people develop. But equally, we have had people like Colm Tóibín on, who was the fiction laureate, and he had begun to write poetry, so we had to talk to him about that.
Yeah.
Gabriel Byrne came on, and we wanted to talk to him about reading. Like, what does he love to read? Oh
Yes.
my gosh, he was amazing on books, you know. So, I
Wasn't
mean,
he?
yeah, I thought that was just like very generous of him as well to give his time like that.
Mm, mm, mm.
And also, even when we turned off the microphone, he said he wanted to stay a bit longer and ask about what's going on in Dublin in the writing scene. And
Never turn off the microphone. Never turn.
yeah, so
That's when you get the gems,
yeah,
when you
that's when
stop.
you get the gems. That's true. Actually, yeah, Melvin Bragg always does that, doesn't he? He says
Really?
now we're going to have the bit at the end where, in our times, where we just have a chat about what you didn't say and what you really
That's
want
right.
to say. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
and so we've had some like really interesting writers and poets, and sometimes we've had actors on, like we had Owen Rowe on. So different people, you know, and it's it kept us. I think it kept us alive through COVID. You know, it kept. Then of course publishers it began to grow wings in a way, and we
Mm,
get sent books now. But really, I suppose ultimately we just want to choose who we want to choose and have on.
I
And
know.
I think that's what we have to do, stick to what we would like, you know.
You're absolutely
Um,
right. Because then
yeah,
it shows you're enjoying it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But it is good fun. I mean, do you enjoy it, Alan? Do
Oh,
you like it?
absolutely. Now you
Yeah.
did say that you're doing it twice a week. I think you meant twice a month.
Oh, sorry, twice, not twice
Yeah,
a
yeah.
week.
No,
That would
just
have been
just
twice a month. Oh my
we we,
God. Yeah.
we have to manage people's expectations. So if people don't know how to go about finding you, how would they do it?
Well, if you just put in books for breakfast, Google it, it'll come up. It's on all Spotify, everything, you know, so it's
Yeah,
just there. And
yeah.
you can see all the back interviews, you know. So we've had people like Louise Kennedy as well, like just loads of new kind of, I think, current writers as well. And other poets as well and writers. So yeah, it's
That's
good. It's got a good
wonderful.
backlog.
Yeah,
I
no,
think
I
we've reached
absolutely recommend that.
64 now or something. I don't know how many you've reached, Alan. You've probably
Sorry, say
reached
that again.
We've reached number 63 or 4, I think. So,
Oh, I think
yeah.
you're 121.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so, any plans for the future?
Plans for the future are I'm always saying this that I just want to do more writing.
Mm,
But I'm working on a new book which will come out next year, hopefully.
yeah,
So I'm currently at the moment going through all those poems and trying to be tough and throw out the bad ones and edit and fix and change and arrange. So
yeah.
I'm doing that. But I've been tinkering a little bit like painters going into the field of of poetry. I've been tinkering with short stories and writing them, so I'll be working on those as well. So that's what I want to do. I want to just next year now devote my time to writing more stories and writing more poems. So that's it. And doing the podcast. And also, you see, teaching as well, because I still enjoy that. So mentoring, I do a lot of work for the National Mentoring Program. That's when you encounter, I think, younger poets coming up as well. And I think that's great. Because actually, one of the poets I mentored last year, she's now up for the Forward Prize debut book of poetry, which is a big prize in the UK and at the British Isles. So there is hope, I think. I think that if the experience of other poets can be used to help younger poets coming up, it's brilliant. So I think we should all be working together for that,
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And doing the podcast and doing workshops like that puts you in the way of seeing that new talent coming up. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
not
then as
getting
you also
complacent, I think, Alan. The main thing is do not get complacent,
know,
and never accept that this is the way it is. I
and be
think,
ready to adapt.
yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're being very positive, aren't we now, Alan,
Oh yeah,
today?
well, why not? We are positive people.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. So, and of course, the other thing is just to finish up is the Bere Arts Festival, the Bere Island Arts Festival.
Yeah, exactly.
You're doing a workshop there. Can people still book into that if they're so
Yeah,
inclined?
you actually
Near
can.
enough
So
to you.
it's just repeat again. It's the 19th to the 22nd of September. So just go on to the Bere Island Festival and you'll see it all there. It's got all the listings of all the exciting events. There's a movement and poetry workshop with Keith Payne and Emma Pavan. There's a pinhole photography workshop with Harry Moore. There's a building the boat performance with Mick O'Shea and Keith Payne and others. And what else is going on? Bill Griffin exhibition, as you said.
That's right.
There's Lisa Lamb will be coming down, I think, and she will be singing. So there's going to be lots of music. So I think it looks really vibrant, and hopefully the sun will be out. We'll all have a great time, moving from venue to venue. And so I think anyone listening, just check it out and do book. And the poetry workshop, I'd be delighted to see anybody there. I think, going to cap it at so it won't be a huge number, but so do check it out, because I think it's better for in a more intimate group. We can work together
100%.
better that way. Yeah, so
100%. Yeah.
so it'll be good. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, I'll put that down in the show notes. All of
okay.
that information, and I'll also put your podcast down there, the link to that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that'd be great.
And anything else that you and I discuss after,
Okay.
we can put it down there.
Okay.
And it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
You're a
Alan.
ray of sunshine.
So are you.
Bright
Thank
and
you
early
very
in the
much.
morning.
Thank you so
Well,
much. It was a delight. Thank you.
Not at all. Not at all. Continued success to you. And
Thank you.
hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Okay. Thanks, Alan.
Bye-bye, everybody. And thanks for watching. See you next week. Bye-bye.